the center for you all. I'm placing the mics, y'all. And so we really know what people are doing. It's about to get serious. We also have like a talking stick. I like to use this as a recorder, and it's just a way people could grab that who want to speak. Okay. So thank you all for coming back. We felt it was really important if we were going to show a heavy documentary to not keep it in that realm of just film. Like, this is real life, and this is people's histories and experiences, and this is work that's being actively done to try to address these wrongs. So who better to speak on that than people that have lived that, right? So I'm going to sit over here, and we're going to have a panel discussion, and then Dan is our resident historian on YA. So while our panelists are going to lead with these questions, Dan has historical knowledge that for context may also be helpful. Like, he knows at that time what was happening in California history, or what the governor was, or placing things in context. And that's really important. And I want to say some of the work that we do at CJCJ, we have our reports back there. I hope you take them. Some of our work is documenting this history, is doing interviews. We interviewed my father and some other folks on their time spent there. And there's something really powerful that happens when someone understands themselves outside of the individual and in a historical context of their relationship to power and systems, where it takes some of that stigma of this like individual shame that families hold, and maybe they can understand themselves in context of, this wasn't about me, this was about a system. So it's really important that we tell those truths that way too, just different ways of looking at it and what this work looks like. So thank you all for being here. I want to let you all introduce yourselves again. We also have another guest who didn't introduce himself, so we'll have him start. So we'll go that way. And I think that's the mic, brother, and give it a go. Introduce yourself, how you feel you'd like to, and acknowledge maybe the years that you were inside of YA.
And just speak. You can hear me, or I gotta.
I think you should hold it.
Hold it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's up, y'all? Buenas tardes. My name is Edgar Ibarra Gutierrez. I grew up in a small town in Watsonville, out there in the Central Coast, with my mom and my three siblings. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby, right? I kind of, folks try to say like, oh, you got privilege and all that. Like, nah, I didn't get that. I wish I did, but it's still grew up in a loving home. I was incarcerated in DJJ like from 2008, 2011. I ended up catching a case when I was in there, shifted me to the adult side, which I went straight from there. You go to Stockton County Jail, and then from there Tracy, and then Tracy to a level 4 prison yard. And in the whole process, you know, it was a crazy one. However, I'll get into that later. I work for an organization called the Milpa Collective out of the Salinas area. Founded by folks who were formerly incarcerated, been through the DJJ, the prison system, just trying to come back and give some way and give back to the community somehow, some way, right? The quote is, we were once part of the problem, now we're trying to be part of the solution, right? That's the most important thing. So I'm gonna say that much palabra.
Hi everyone, Claudia Gonzalez, she, her, ella. I am the policy associate at Root and Rebound. I spent my years in YA in my early 2000s, so super predator era. Now I work on policy, and so a lot of my work has been driven by my lived experience expertise. And so I now help to push statewide laws that will protect people. For example, I had a really big win this year where I got AB 1148 passed. So now formerly incarcerated people who come home who owed child support had to pay child support within 30 days, regardless if they had a job or not, right? And that would cause people to get in debt for many, many years. So now they'll have 10 years of relief, right? And my work came from the fact that we know in California, there's 5,000 barriers, 5,000 laws, right, alone, and so many other barriers. So I think now I'm in a place of privilege, right, where I got many more opportunities than other formerly incarcerated people. And so I need to use my leadership, right, and my skills to help other people.
So, my name is Israel Salazar Villa. 45 years old, he, him, his, with the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice, which all the folks here are part of. Currently 40 organizations with representation in 22 counties. And we need a lot of help. So if y'all are interested, tap in. Let's make it more counties. We need more help. But I mean, background wise, I shared earlier, school to prison pipeline survivor. I now have words to what happened. Most of my life, I didn't really understand what happened because I went from being a GATE student doing pre-algebra in 4th grade to being, you know, meeting these folks in 5th grade and suspensions, expulsions, and then into juvenile hall right in the summer of 6th and 7th grade. And basically, you know, I'm 45, so our historian could help us say during the 70s, some people were strategizing, having some conversations about mass incarceration, which took off in the 80s and 90s. Just like my sister mentioned earlier, they called me a super predator when I was a kid. Most definitely a system expert. You know, I was in and out of juvenile hall. Once probation got me and gets us, it's real hard to disconnect from these folks. It's a trap and it's by design. And they have this thing called endless probation, which we've been trying to reverse, which we passed it. Did we pass it last year and the Vato vetoed it? The governor vetoed it. So they have this thing called endless probation. So by that time I was 15, I had probation stacked up till I was like 21 and I couldn't get a license, they said. In and out of juvenile hall, you know, like the reality is the narrative, not all the correctional folks were bad, but the large majority of them, in my experience, were very bad, very abusive, told me a lot of things when I was a kid. I wasn't shit, wasn't gonna be shit. I was gonna die due to gangs or I was gonna get killed by the police, you know. I went to group homes. I went to CYA in the 90s. Thank you so much. And these systems are very hurtful to oneself, to the family, to the community. And I know about it well. You seen what it was. You know what I mean? Like, what do you expect putting young people in these type of circumstances, very violent, very abusive, not just amongst, you know, inmates, but staff? I mean, yeah, my bad. I'm going probably too long because this is just an intro. My bad. Sometimes I got a lot to say on these conversations. I sat in these cells for hella years, you know. Like I shared, probably close to 20 in total in installments, and none of it's good. It doesn't help. You know what I mean? I don't think it's designed to help. It further hurts, you know. And ultimately, I continued. You know, I didn't come out of high heels, shit. Living in those circumstances, and those times in the 90s, it was on. It was on and cracking. You know, I'm from East Salinas, and I am who I am. And long story short, it's very violent, you know, and you're not going to heal in that. They're not. It's just. I mean, I guess I'll just try to land my plane and just say that, like, in no point of almost 20 years of incarceration did I ever feel like anybody was trying to help me. I never had a probation, a parole, or a federal parole officer help me in any which way. It's always been the opposite. And, you know, because of my experience, it's why I'm here and what I do. You know, the reality is like that shit fucked me up. I'm sorry, Zoom world. I cuss sometimes. I'm 45. I stopped drinking about a little over a year ago, but like I deal with a lot of, like, keep it real, depression, anxiety, PTSD, insomnia, like all of that shit all together. And the root cause is these folks, you know, being separated as a kid and pushed into that pipeline, and the trajectory that it continued all the way up to the federal level. So I've seen every single level and layer. None of it's good. And you know, I guess I'll just close by this part by saying that I never even heard, I might have heard the word trauma, but I never heard it in there. No one ever asked me about my traumas or any root cause. And the systems, they're not designed to address or help root cause issues. They're designed, as you heard, to punish. They're keeping it real in those days. Now they hide it. They sound real good. They're about healing and trauma-informed care. They're full of shit. They're still hurting our kids. They're hurting our communities. And we got to do everything we can to dismantle, transform, and ultimately for us and the incarceration of our young people.
Oh my God.
So I'm Dan Macallair, and professor here at SF State and executive director of the Center on Juvenile Criminal Justice. And I won't repeat what I said earlier. Just to actually for your purposes, we are talking about the youth prison system that existed in California from the 1890s until June 30th of this year. So just same system. And the old, you can tell the old folks up here, we still refer to it as the Youth Authority or YA. And the younger folks will refer to it as DJJ. And the reason that is in 2005, in one more effort to reform the system, Governor Schwarzenegger decided to change the name, which he did numerous times over the decades, thinking that they were going to get a different result. They never did. But we went from the Youth Authority to DJJ, the Division of Juvenile Justice. Same thing. All they did was change the nameplates change the name outside the door. But it was the same system, same people running it, same institutions, and the same reality. So.
Thanks, Dan. Can we also have a raise of hands of formerly incarcerated folks in the audience if people feel comfortable? I know just to see, I would like to see, I know you all are, but there might be some others, I thought. So, and then we know the panelists as well. So, okay. I think it's important for us when I started getting to farther institutions than my parents did, it became ever more urgent for me to find people like myself. So I think it's important for folks to identify. I could have said system impacted as well, but I think it's important. Okay, so our first question, and we'll encourage you to take lead on this question, someone, and then other folks can answer if they feel called. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience. So our first question is about if you could share a little bit about the reputation of, and I also call it YA because my dad served in there, so to me it's YA. But can you share a little bit about the reputation of YA or DJJ at the time that you were going in there? How did people talk about it, or how did you feel when you found out that you were going there? Like, what was the discussions going on about that youth prison system when you found out?
Yeah, no, definitely. To be honest, y'all, and it was the rites of passage, whether I like it or not, or say it in that way. It was one of those things where we always talked about it. Our older homies went there. Oh, you got to do and go shine more than they do, right? You got to go into this space, gladiator school, and just be more aggressive, more violent than anyone else could possibly be, right? And it was really, really glamorized. And growing up around my friends, hearing it from my older friends, the older homies and all that stuff, it was really glamorized in that way. And it was in a way, it's really, really sad because no one ever thought about, oh, what about school, right? Not even community college, graduating high school, that was never a conversation or anything. It was like, man, you got to go there. Juvenile hall, that's preschool. You got to go to gladiator school, earn your bones and come back. And God knows what if you end up in prison. So that was really the conversation around it. I never heard about it. Hey, this is gonna happen to you. You're gonna get put on potty watch, or you're gonna get shackled up and made to do your forced to do your homework in a stand-up cage, or end up programming in a cage for your 1 hour a day, or solitary confinement. No one at any moment told me any of that. I wish that would have been a good freaking disclaimer. It probably would have deterred me from going in there, right? And just even the thought of it. It's like all those different things, but it was really glamorized, right? And it just comes to show how uninvested our communities have been, right? Me coming from a particular agricultural community in the city of Watsonville, where you're probably eating strawberries, that's where they come from, right? And knowing that either you're gonna work in the strawberry fields, or you're gonna commute all the way to San Jose or Santa Cruz to go get whatever work you possibly can. And literally seeing this whole space where it's disinvested, ICE raids commonly within our communities, but also having a big history of organizing. We had I want to say the only led woman cannery strike in the 80s. That whole area had known a lot of organizing work, a lot of how to move the people, right? And it's by design, right? They knew at a certain point all those jobs and all those economy went overseas or south of the border, and next thing you know, hey, let's incarcerate. That's a new model of business, right? We know we send these folks out, and we saw generations of some of my cousins and uncles who dealt with drug abuse, right? Some of the older guys they all left. There was a gap. And the schools continue to suspend and expel. And in the whole process, right, again, and to just loop it back around, that divestment it has continued to impact us today. If we go back to some of our communities and we actually look at critically what's taking place, you can honestly see the dilapidated conditions that our communities continue to face and see. And so this is not just about an institution, it's even continuing to go back to our communities back and into the future, right? So all in all, just let y'all know it was such a shit show. And in general, it was really glamorized in a way that was almost, again, I go back to sad, but to the reality that we all knew, and that's all, you know, misery loves company, as folks like to say. And then in that space, it foments. You saw it in the video, right? The video is, you can see what was taking place, and it lingers. It's like almost like you leave you leave your a banana peel right in your car, and you come back like, damn. Hey, and I left it in the summer in there. It stinks, and it stinks like that for a long ass time. And that's how it was in there. It lingers, all that pain, all that sorrow, and everything. And I guess I wish that someone would have told me that when I was a kid. So much palabra.
You know, just to provide some context, early 2000s, you know, I mentioned super predator era, we began trying to prosecute young people as adults, right? So as a result, we had a influx of young men. In the Central Valley, we had a lot of young men who were being sent to YA, right? And so what happened is all the veterans, like the OGs, are in prison, right? The young men are going to YA. So who's left in the neighborhood is young women. I was the only girl in my neighborhood. And so I already had a pretty good right? A lot of credibility being the only young woman in my gang. And so for a young woman to go to YA, you can only imagine your street cred, right? And I never meant to go to YA, right? I always say this. I was really happy going to juvenile hall. It was fun, right? It was like, oh, this is fun, a break from everyday life, right? And I always share the story about when I got to YA, and I was a really high profile case, just want to throw it out there. But when I got to YA, it was like 24-hour lockdowns, right? Like I'm trying to remember like when I saw sunlight, right? When I the amount of times I was able to breathe fresh air, and it's only a few times. And that's when I really realized, right, that like, wow, now I'm in the big leagues, right? This ain't no longer Kansas. And so what I had aimed was like, I wanted it to be, you know, this gang member superstar, right? Because self-fulfilling prophecy, when I started getting in trouble, and mind you, the first time I went to juvenile hall was because of truancy. It wasn't because I committed a crime. It was because I had been truant one too many times. So the solution to that was to go to juvenile hall. And I always think about that. And that happens to a lot of young people. And then you end up in the school to prison pipeline. So I went from going to juvenile hall for being truant to ending up in YA for a really high profile case, right? And I share the story about the first time I was with my bunkie, and it was this young woman, and it was a little white girl, right? And I was like, hey, little white girl, why are you locked up, right? And then she she goes on to tell me like, oh, I killed my relative. And I was like, oh, I was like, oh, cool, right? I didn't sleep that night because I thought she was gonna kill me, right? I was keeping it real, but I'm like, damn, I'm with the big boys now, and this is what I wanted. And it was the first time I critically thinked, right? And I was like, wow, like I shouldn't be here, right? But again, the school to prison pipeline brought me here, and so the reputation was that if you went to YA, you made it, right? You would go back to your neighborhood, and life has been made up for you, right? Everyone would support you, everyone would know you, would have infamy, but in reality, like it was the contrary, right? You came home and you struggled so much, and so it was that allure of infamy, of being known, of being respected, that led me to YA.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. Mine is pretty similar experiences. I'm from Salinas. Also, that's the salad bowl capital of the world. So if you're eating lettuce, it's probably coming from my hood. You know, I went in 1995 at that time, there was over 10,000 of us in California Youth Authority. And my experience was pretty similar to what my colleagues shared here. You know, unfortunately, like I was kind of looking forward to it. I kind of wanted to, because the folks I grew up looking up to in the neighborhood, which some folks might call a gang, I call them, to us, it was a neighborhood watch. They're the ones that kind of looked out for the neighborhood and folks and things like that. And similar to what was shared, like I had two cousins that went to YA and a bunch of homies that were like the generation older than me, or the two older than me. And there was a status when you came home, you know, like you made it or something, you know what I mean? There was a level of respect. There was probably like a level of fear, and in a sick way, like the whole concept of like hurt people, like I was very hurt, you know what I mean? I had one of my best friends killed in 7th grade, Ruben Morphine. And that really impacted my life and the trajectory of my life. And in those times, that shit was wild, straight up. You know, it was wild, corrupt as hell. When I was in Chad, basically, let me see, man. I mean, some of the trauma, there's just some things that I try not to think about, but on the drive up here, I was kind of thinking like, what can I share that's going to be impactful? And I'm sharing it not to glamorize, or definitely not to trigger, but there's a trigger warning. I mean, the suicides was very rampant, and suicide attempts. The conditions are so horrible that youngsters were killing themselves, And unfortunately, I didn't get to see one, but I got to hear one. One of my neighbors, a little white kid, unfortunately too, who was preyed upon. You know, either you're gonna fight for yours and be an aggressor or defend yourself, or you're gonna become a victim. Unfortunately, that was the reality there, and he quit. He killed himself, you know, and it was a fucked up memory for me. Damn, I cussed again. Because me and Macallair, we just got to listen to his struggle, and we're like, hey man, what's this dude doing? He didn't have a roommate, you know. And long story short, he killed himself. So we gotta like hear that over the vent, and also those safety checks. Is they didn't even know for hours, you know. It got quiet and we just went to sleep. This was the middle of the night, and then in the middle of the morning sometime, maybe like 5 a.m, we heard the alarm, medical, oh shit, you know. Violence, the fights. I mean, there was a time when I was on Paro, and again, like for some weird reason, like I was loving it, I was having fun. I was doing what I wanted to do, but basically we were able to fight every Saturday morning before breakfast, like at 5 a.m. You could pick whoever you want. You know what I mean? Any sound, who you want to fight. The cops are setting it up, letting us out, duking it out, and you wouldn't get a write-up. Put us back in our room. It was a setup also in Chad. Like whenever you got into a fight, they would put you on a red tag, like the lowest phase, and they'd move us upstairs in the corner. And each phase, in order to phase up to the first phase, you would have to integrate with a quote unquote opposition. You know what I mean? So every 2 months, we're going to come out and we're going to get off on each other, and we're going to start all over, our 2 months all over. So I was on that thing for about a good year and a half. So like just the amount of abuse, I mean, one that I thought about, I got a homie named since we were kids. While we were in Chad, his name got changed because they hit him with one of those, they got these like Berthas, and they have block guns. So like when there's a riot or a melee, they're supposed to like shoot them. If folks are over there fighting, they're gonna like shoot them, hit the floor so that it bounces that way. Or they have other ones that were like cylinder, like maybe aluminum, about that big and about that round, and it's a shotgun shooting it. And that one is a gas, like chemical agents, the same thing. If there's a fight over there, they kind of shoot it over there and everybody's gonna burn. Well, it was very common for these folks to run inside. Once we used to call them the turtles, like the security folks, when there's a fight, they come in the vans, you know? Once that door opened, you better start getting down, because they used to come and shooting. And he got hit in the head, and he literally got the scar like this. It peeled his whole cap back, like literally. I got another homie from my neighborhood he got hit with the face, in the face directly, and they broke most of his teeth. So again, like the level of violence when I was there, it was extreme. everybody was on everybody, you know, Northern California against Southern California, the black homies against the South, the whites and the blacks in the South, the Buddha, like it was just all around the circumstances. It was basically war. And you know, when I came home, I discharged the day before my 21st birthday. That's why I wasn't trying to catch a case. I was trying to get away with the things that I did. A lot of young people were even moving on staff just to get out of there, just to get sent to prison, because that's how bad it was. They'd rather go to prison. But I came home in February of '99. Within a 2-month period, 7 of us from my neighborhood came home. And that probably wasn't a good idea, or however reason, we all came home around the same time. Within 3 months, we were all in the county jail fighting life sentences. All of us. Because of the conditioning, the conditions that you live in, you're always at war. Just what they were talking about, what Dan was talking about, the resentment towards these officers who mistreat you and neglect you and disrespect you and disrespect your property, like you see in that South search, and antagonize you. And then you get released, you know, there's no more COs, there's no more door. I go back to my community of East Salinas, which at the time it was cracking. And hence, within 3 months, I was fighting some serious charges because I came home much worse. You come home worse, you're gonna get desensitized. You get used to seeing violence and people's face cut open and stabbings and you name it. To the point that when I went to prison, I was like, oh yeah, it's on. This was to prepare me for prison. When you get to prison, it was what was it? Walk for me. It was a cakewalk. It was nothing. The amount of violence that I seen, the amount of bloodshed that I seen and experienced while in Chad specifically, hands down, was the bloodiest of all my years of incarceration.
Thank you, brother. Actually, I would like for Dan to say something about the context of the gladiator schools for people that might not know about that. Can you like say what that was and then how did they get caught? Like just quickly, and then we'll go on to another question. And this is kids that we're talking about, y'all. Who gets to be called a kid and then who gets to be labeled a criminal once they're in there and then not treated as kids. But I just like want to also highlight that, you know, but Dan, can you say just a little bit about what that was?
Well, I mean, it's essentially, it's the culture inside the institutions. When you go in, kids divide racially, ethnically, geographically, as Israel is describing. And it's been that way forever. And they, you know, it happens for 2 reasons: solidarity and protection. If don't have somebody covering your back, you're vulnerable to assault. And this is lessons you learn. You understand this going in, as you know, as my colleagues up here have talked about. You learn this. You first hear in juvenile hall that you're going to have to fight when you get down there. You better be ready. You know, I've been interviewing people who have been in the youth authority since the earliest ones in the 1950s. Not when they were there, but later on. But what's shocking is the consistency over time. Now, when I say I've interviewed hundreds, about 40 of them right now are on death row, and they got their start. And the reason I was involved in their cases is because they were in the youth authority, and virtually everyone has told me that their lessons, as Israel just said, they got their lessons in violence in the youth authority, and that includes actually one of the most interesting ones I had was T.D. Bingham, who was the founder of the Aryan Brotherhood in San Quentin back in 1968, and he's probably responsible for about 20 murders, and he's doing time in the federal system, and he went in as a car thief at 13 out of Fresno, and quickly learned the lessons of the institution, and the necessity of fighting in order to survive, and that's the most shocking thing, and everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. The kids all knew it going in, and the staff all knew it.
Thanks, Dan. So we have a few more questions. We're gonna cut them short because we want to make time for the audience, for students, for whomever has questions in the audience, but I'm gonna ask 2 more questions. And the next one is about the fights, because this was like an institute, this was about the institution, not as individual as it seems, even though it happened to individual people. So the question is, how soon upon when you first got there did you witness a fight? And you don't all have to say, maybe one or two of you, and then under what conditions did it occur? But really, how soon? Because this is a question Dan has been asking people for 30 years, and we pretty much know the timeline of what those answers are. And it's important for other folks to hear that.
So in 95, if you were from Northern California, you got sent to what they call NRCC, Northern Reception, and it was in Sacramento. And that was kind of like, you might go there, depending on what age you were, they would house you in a certain dorm. And you're there for like that, you know, that they do the first like maybe week or so. You got to go see the mental health. You got to go see a dentist, a doctor, all the diagnostics, things like that. So I got picked up from juvenile hall. I remember maybe around 4 o'clock in the, well, they told me in the morning, hey, you're leaving today, Via. Ooh, I was all excited. I started doing my push-ups. I was in there shadow boxing and getting ready straight up. And then I kind of had with my buzzard luck, they picked me up in a van, just a regular county jail van. And so I'm thinking in a couple hours, I'm gonna go over here and get in a fight. But I was in the van like the whole freaking night. We went to all kinds of county jails, picking up people, dropping off people. Then finally the next day in the morning, I don't know, we get there in the morning, get housed. To answer your question, the very next day I got there, got housed, didn't get out or nothing. The next day they take me to go start my diagnostics, and there's like a little holding room. I got there, I met some other homie from Sacramento, and then maybe like 10 minutes later, somebody that I knew from Salinas, who was I guess what you call opposition, who had just left like maybe 3 days before me. They let him in the room, so I was like, oh yeah. And as soon as they let him in and the staff leaves and close the doors, I jumped on them, bop, 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 bop. And that was my first incident, was like the next day. But when you play with fire, you get burned. And I learned that these folks weren't playing. And when I said these folks, was the guards, because since for what that triggered was after we got pepper sprayed and handcuffed and we were in a cage for hours, finally took me back, packed my stuff, and then they moved me to the other side where it was like all primos from Southern California. You know what I mean? And so it led to that one incident, led to a whole lot of fights, because I was living with mostly well, at the time we'll say opposition or the folks from down south. So we was getting fighting almost every day or getting jumped, you know what I mean? And when we would come out, me and Masali, he had done the same thing, so they moved him over there too. And he was younger. I was, I think, 16. He got in the fight in the youngster dorm, so they brought him over here with the big boys, and they put him with me with the Southsiders. And then after that, it was on. Like every chance we came out, we basically would rush, or you know what I mean? You're gonna get beat bad by a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of fights.
So that was by design, y'all, and as a mode of control. I'd like for one of you to share how soon.
Honestly, it was I came in, they drove me all the way from Santa Cruz County, and I still remember passing. It was my first time passing through the Golden Gate Bridge. The guy told me, oh, look at that. That was the last time you'll see it for a while. I was like, all right, ass, right? Literally that same day, honestly, saw someone from Fresno, and how I understood it, it was on and cracking. We right there in Preston, the reception center, right at the top of the hill. R&R, we got busy. They sprayed me, and I still remember the guy's name, Dan Campbell. Tall, he was an Olympic boxer. Freaking size 12 boot, right in the middle of my back. Steps on me, said, "Welcome to Preston." And I was 14, 15 at the time. Freaking 95 pounds wet, maybe. Had my hair was all kind of crazy, kind of like right now, but a little bit more crazier, looking like the honeycomb dude. And yeah, man, it was my first time. I went to the whole, did my first SMP there. I went to Ironwood, my secure management program, and I did all my receiving from that place. And it was like freaking 10 seconds of like, probably we both threw like 3 or 4 punches, got sprayed, gassed up, not with the small one, with the big one, and then like kicked your ass a little bit up into the van and then put you in the hole, and then you're like, came back for you like 2-3 hours later, get your decontamination shower. And I was like, damn, this kind of sucks, right? But it was one of those things, right, where it's like you don't even know what you're doing, you're just doing it. And again, the conditions in that place, the environment, all those things has led up to that, right? Even what I was hearing when I was a kid coming in. And even at the most time, right? Like when folks, and you know, going back to what Mr. Villa was saying about how folks suicide, that was a rampant thing. And I unfortunately got to see someone get carried out of the room, blue and purplish during my first 90 days there, in Ironwood. And it was kind of crazy because I didn't think much of it, right? And then you see something like that and you just desensitize yourself to it and just like, all right, it's gonna happen again. So get ready. Well, that was my first time.
Thank you, brother. I'm aware of the time. It's 6:13. We have this space till, we'll be in here till 7, but you all are students and have other lives. So 6:30 is when we'll wrap up the question. So I'm gonna ask one more, even though we really have 2 other ones and all the answers will be really interesting. And I encourage you all in the back, we have copies of our report about the 132-year history of YA. We actually have 2 of the report authors here. One is Gracia and one is Dan. So you have them sign your report if you want. But here's the other question, y'all. I'm jumping to the end because I think it's important for people to hear this. And I also want to illustrate, I'm going to turn it over if anybody has any questions. These are people that are also doing work and getting paid to do this work in a way of ending youth incarceration. Some of them going to school for it, some of them not, running big things like students that are here for criminal justice studies. I encourage you to think of what you can do with your degree and what are you getting it for and how can you contribute, you know? So I really want to make that call. So knowing what you know now about youth incarceration and the history of that institution, and we've asked you to reflect on your time there, what do you feel could have helped you instead of the punishment that you received? And I say this knowing that all of you all are part of like youth justice work and have really had to think about what these possibilities are, because sometimes people throw at barriers right away of what can help. So I also want to mention that in our report, CJCJ, our agency, and Dan, we've actually called for reparations on for the youth that have served time there. As you can see, this was state-sanctioned child abuse. I don't know how much we'll have time to get into that, but I encourage you all as students to also think of that and what can that look like. And there are actually examples of California paying reparations in certain situations, and that can look like a lot of things, but we're in a school, so let's think of education as something maybe as well. But that question of what do you feel could have helped you instead of the punishment you received? You want to start, sister?
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier that the first time I got locked up was because I was truant. And so I tell people that I feel like I was born into incarceration. My dad was a pintero, so he was in federal prison all my life, right? I've only seen my dad like 4 times in my life. He was always in prison. And so growing up, I had my grandfather who was a UFW member. He was an organizer, a farm worker, and who retired and went to Mexico. And then I had my brother. And so he was one of the first young people in the state of California to be sentenced as an adult. He's still in prison now. He's going to reach 25 years in 2024. And so we hope that he'll qualify for some relief. But I was 12 years old when he got sentenced to life. And so my dad had always been in prison. I lost my grandfather, and then I lost the only other male in my life, which was my brother. And so I had a lot of abandonment trauma. And when I started getting in trouble, and by in trouble, I said, being truant. I didn't want to go to school. I was really depressed. And so instead of teachers and counselors and administration recognizing that, they criminalized me, right? And so they put me in, what is the name of the program? It was like, instead of regular school, you went to like a classroom and did worksheet, right? And it was like really 5th grade level material I was supposed to do, right? Nothing productive. And then in juvenile hall, it was even worse. And so instead of recognizing my trauma, right, and supporting me and maybe getting me mental health, right, anything, they further criminalized me. And so again, it was like I was a bad child, I was a criminal, I was a super predator. And so self-fulfilling prophecy became true, and I aimed to be that super predator, right? I thought the only thing I was capable of being was a criminal. that's what I aspired to, right? That's what I wanted to be, because that's what society told me. And I look back and think about, where would I be now, right? And I often compare myself to other people my age. I'm 35, right? And be like, wow, they have doctorates, they have masters, they're doing this, but I'm only, and it's a big accomplishment, right? I'm only a policy associate, which is a great job, but like, I think like I would have gotten much more further in life, right? Had people understood trauma, and not because I was a young woman of color. I'm Native American and Chicana, right? And so yeah, like I think had I gotten the support I needed and referred to as a human being and not dehumanized, right? I would be somewhere else. So I think that's what I missed. Compassion from other people.
Services. I'm gonna be 100, which I wish I would have never got there at all. Like I wish, like I looking back in retrospect, someone Israel said it was cool, it was fun. I detested the whole notion of being incarcerated. Remember one of my first epiphanies was when I was in Ironwood and I came out and I looked at all the tags. It was all green and pink tags. That means it was all black and brown kids in there. Everyone that was overseeing us was white from Amador County. They have no semblance of what the hell we go through, either from the inner city to the barrio culture, right? Had no understanding or didn't know how to relate with us. So I really detested even just the notion of knowing, like, man, what could that place done for me? Couldn't have done shit, to be honest. But we did need, and what I think all our communities need was a robust investment. We have closed down prisons. This whole state justice system has closed, and we have not seen a dollar for dollar investment back into our communities. What kind of shit is that? That's where I really get caught up, and I get pissed, because it's like you're closing it, but they're just moving and shifting the funds. And our communities continue to stay in a dilapidated situation where this is going to reoccur again, just a little bit different. Now in our juvenile halls who are have poor oversight. Not only do they have poor oversight, but they don't have the necessary training. But when I say training and oversight and all that, means just more money back into that system. So, it's a crazy situation just to think about it all, and how it's running and how it's redesigning itself to stay afloat, right? We went through a carceral boom from the 70s to the 90s. Now we're looking at a rehab boom under a complete different rebranding of the system. Now they're using words as rehabilitation to soften the blow, right? Trying to really embody this whole notion of rehab. So I'm thinking it's like, no, we don't need to be having these programs in there or anything like that. We need every single program and resource needed so that no one in our community ends up in these type of places. Point blank, that's say we needed to see just a robust investment, as they're willing to spend billions of dollars into this prison system. Recently, Governor Newsom talked about a $380 million investment into San Quentin to redesign two buildings, right? Just think about it. What would $380 million look like in your community? What would it do that? What would it look like, right? What kind of infrastructure do we need? And that's really where I'm at in my own way of thinking. And to kind of answer the question, I think the most important thing that I got in there, it was I received no service or program that ever helped me in there. The one thing that helped me was my Tío Chuy and my Uncle Dennis, Native American spiritual elders. And you see some of the pictures up there. They brought in the medicine. They talked about our stories, our history, our culture, our identity as indigenous people, as Chicano men, as Chicano indigenous men, of what it meant to actually fight for your people, to go back into the community and be part of that village, to try to contribute back in whatever possible way. They offered me an example that I never saw, and they all came from the barrio, the reses and all these different things, and that medicine, it lit something in me, and again, and that's nothing attributed, that's not rehabilitation, there's no restorative justice. That is what we've done since the beginning of time. Sit in circle, talk, platicar, in front of that fire, ask the spirits, the 4 directions, all those different things, which is really, really important. Because sometimes we might find ourselves in another piece of land that we may be foreigners, right? My folks come from south of the border. They're Yoeme, Yoaki, Tarahumara, right? Over here, we got some of the Ohlone, Costonoans, all them folks, right? That we also offer them and their descendants, wherever they may be at. So I say all those things, right? But I say this again, there's nothing that place could have offered me to have helped me. They say they try to say, oh, you got to crack at education. Fuck your education. And sorry my language, but it's not appropriate for me to get incarcerated to get action at education. I should be getting education while I'm out there. That it's not. It's like we have so much money invested not just in our carceral system, but in the educational system that we're seeing young people go into juvenile halls and all these things. So sorry for being long-winded, but that's where I'm at, y'all.
That's good.
I'll try to be brief. I know we don't got too much time. I mean, I think for me, what comes to mind right now is what did my parents need? My parents were field workers. We would grow up poor. I grew up in some apartments that was for farm workers. So everybody was poor. You know what I mean? I think we kind of had in hindsight, we had an upper hand in a lot of my peers because we had two poor parents rather than one. A lot of houses, a lot of the apartments were missing their papas and missing their mamas because of, you know, the war on drugs or the war on folks that look like us. So I feel like, honestly, the whole victim of circumstances, that we were poor and that qualified us to get that housing, which was legit, brand new apartments. It was nice. And you have some big ass apartments with a bunch of young people whose parents work in the fields and don't get home till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Some parents had 2 jobs, such as my own. And so there's that. As far as like what type of programming our kids need in there right now is they need us, they need the village. They need programs from the community, community-based organizations, community-based program and services. They call me a career criminals, a bunch of things, you know. As I shared my background, I continued all the way to the federal level of this. What helped me when I came home was one, just a freaking opportunity, man. I just need an opportunity. And I found that also at MIPA, you know what I mean? Which was at the time a rookie, you know, social justice organization in my community. And that's where I got introduced to these folks, the work, the movement, quote unquote movement. But it's I guess I could answer it by the whole decolonizing, you know, like what did I need? I needed Columbus to not get lost and land over here. I needed Cortez to not fucking land in Mexico. Because ever since they landed this side of the world, and now the whole fucking world is just backwards. So what has helped me this time, finally, I've stayed home going on 10 years. One, it was a place, somewhere safe, somewhere where they welcome a felon. You know what I mean? Because unfortunately, my record doesn't look good. It's all violent. So I understand. Every time I came home, I tried, there's a whole list they give you of felon-friendly places like Walmart, McDonald's. I tried all that shit. Nothing was happening. So an opportunity. Also, because of this organization, I've always been proud of my roots and my heritage because of my pops and you know, being where he's from and his migration. But the connection, the reconnection to my culture, to my identity, because they told me a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? And we internalize that after you hear it for so freaking long. But the thing is, like, when you understand your roots, and for some folks, it ain't until you get to college and take some ethnic studies classes. For us, we read a shitload of books in there. But it's my identity. It's understanding our roots and how powerful our ancestors were and are. You know, how much my ancestors contributed to the world in numerous ways. And I guess I'll just say, like, my ancestors were fucking badass. They fucking rock. You know, they're amazing. And therefore, I've also learned through the way our indigenous folks believe is that we're all children are sacred. Therefore, we're all sacred. You know, and love. There was no love in that. There was no love in all those years. They need some love. They need connection. The culture, I think, again, the culture identity is absolutely critical because our education system miseducates the hell out of us. You know what I mean? They said Columbus discovered it when our primos were already there. So it's like the whole decolonizing, uneducating or educating yourself on like historical facts to understand how great we are and that we're destined for greatness. You know what I mean? And then the ceremonies that was mentioned already, that's what has helped me. That's my doctoring. You know, I've been doctored up hundreds of times since I've been home by medicine men and medicine women in numerous places to just help with all that pain and trauma and all that stuff. It's ceremonies, the sweat lodge, peyote ceremonies. I think another thing is, and I'll close right here, is like the whole concept of an authentic, credible messenger, somebody who's not only lived it, but understands it critically and has expertise of social structures, of systematic racism, so on and so forth. They need, like, I feel like, I don't know if anything would help me. To be honest, I was hella fucking hurt and I was just wanted to be the hardest gangster that I could be. But I think seeing people who've been there, who are now out and thriving, you know, like my little bros goes to UCSF, you know, Carla's been to school. I've been to school, but it's that seeing people like us, Tina, who've been there, who've probably felt hopeless most of their time existence, who seeing people like, for me, it's other homies. When I first came out, seeing folks like Juanillo, you know, George, Sammy, and others who've been through what I've been through, but are now thriving. They're now being fathers. I'm a freaking grandpa and I got 3 granddaughters who I love and taking care of. And it's that reconnection to our village and to our family that these systems, it disrupts all that, you know? So I guess I'll land it right there.
Mateo, thank you. We actually have a few more minutes, so we're gonna open it up for a question and answer. Are we gonna take it from the folks online to like honor the Zoom folks that stayed with us? Because we have time for one question first. Should we do the Zoom ones first? Here you go, you take this one.
Let's go ahead and start with taking a few questions. That way, if we get 3 or 4, each of you could pick one up, and that way, as much participation as possible. Does anybody in the room have a question that they want to ask of the panelists? Can you run? Can somebody? I can do both things at once.
I got it. But then you're gonna have to give them
yeah,
that mic.
Yeah, have. So go ahead and ask your questions. So we'll take that one, we'll take the next one, and we'll take 3 questions at once. And then each of you can maybe pick one of them up, or if one resonates more.
I just had a question. If you guys ever go back to like your own communities and try and like educate the youth of those schools, because I'm also from Watsonville and there's still many problems of like youth going into the school to prison pipelines. I was just wondering if you guys go and educate them with your own stories and knowledge.
And then we're gonna take the 3 questions, right?
Let's
So
take
who had the other
those 3
one?
together, and then we'll turn it over to the.
So just for some context and clarification, what exactly is the difference between YA and juvenile hall?
I can actually answer that really fast. That was one is a state institution, like the state did Youth Authority and DJJ. It was the state youth prison system. And the entry level is juvenile hall at a county level. So now that the state youth prison system has left, we have juvenile halls in each county. And so you can go into a juvenile hall, but not go into the youth prison system. That tells me I'm hella right.
That binging is not for us. The floors above us have to start clearing out. We're okay in this room, so just give us a second. And what we're gonna do is take one more question from the room and then turn it over to the panelists to respond. After their response, we'll circle back around to one question in the Zoom and one question in the room. And then we'll see where we're at with time, but I think that will probably be about it.
Sounds ominous.
The purge is now in.
Okay. So my question was, how did being in an environment with state sanctioned racial segregation as such an intricate part of your development as kids impact your ideas about race, including kind of like being in environments where most of the guards are probably of a certain race, you're probably being housed with people that are of a certain race. At that stage, how does that kind of inform the way that you view certain communities? And I guess what was that process like to getting to that stage?
Okay, so let's take these 2, and then after this round, we have 2 more questions. One from in the room, and then one from Zoom.
Okay, so y'all got them out here. Here you go. So one question, one answer per person, and then.
No, definitely from the one for Watsonville. We have an office there, man, right across the street from La Placita, right above Alteños. I personally myself don't live there right now. I live in Vacaville with my cousins. But every time I go home, the handball courts, I go shoot a few games of handball, and I use that as an opportunity to just engage in conversation, critical conversation. You know, you gotta be able to break the ice with that, man. I know most of them. I know either their moms or aunties, somehow, some way. I know someone, right? And then being able to just like break the ice in the way, man, how's mom's doing? How's your brother doing? How's your cousin doing? All those things. And it's like, what are you doing? How's school? And then just being able to engage at that level. And sometimes it's like, man, let's go get some food, right? Just being able to have that type of conversation there, whether it's neither from a place of like, right? It's just like, man, let's just go break some bread, let's chop it up. It's cool, right? And because I've been on the other end when someone tries to lecture me, I fucking hate it. I don't need to hear your shit, right? I get it, you messed up. Yeah, but it's like, okay, just hear me out, right? I just want to know that I'm being heard. So I know that's what I felt. So I always try to do that for other young folks too. So that's the way I do it. And out here, I go into Solano County Juvenile Hall, Yolo Juvenile Hall, and talk with the young folks. We do this curriculum called Joven Noble, really focuses on rites of passage, and cultura and identity, right? And how we can best support these young men as they're there sitting down, right? Again, some of these facilities don't have the resources to support these young people coming home. And even right now, Santa Cruz County, a lot of the folks that were supposed to be in the California Youth Authority, DJJ, are being sent all the way to Sonoma, all the way to Merced, right? Because the county, quote unquote, can't keep them there because there's no place. So now they're also exploring, like, let's build a new building. It's like, no, like, you guys have not learned it, right? They brag about being a model site, and it's like, and that even just that whole thought, right? What are you a model site of incarceration? How about just be a model site of not locking up kids? And so it's just things like that. But we're out there, man. Believe it or not, I got my colleagues. If you ever find yourself back home, go live office, free Wi-Fi, free food, all that chill, kick it, right? And they have an event. They have events here and there, community circulos, places also to strategize, organize, and advocate. You know, on some of the stuff that's happening locally. But yeah.
Who's going to answer that wonderfully layered and really important question to think about? Thank you so much for that. That is so loaded and so real. And nowadays, y'all, a lot of the guards, it's people of color that are trying to come up, and they're the ones that are put in those positions. So there's also something for us to have right there.
So that's a great question. And you know, my community of Salinas, of East Salinas, it's very brown. We're the salad bowl capital of the world, just like Watsonville, the strawberry capital. That means we're surrounded by fields, and who works in the fields? You know, they look like me, they look like us, you know? So I didn't grow up with a lot of my African brothers and sisters. Keep it real. I remember when the first family moved into my neighborhood of brothers, they're from Grape. I still know them, Mondo, Keisha, good peoples. But when they first moved in, we were kids. We're talking elementary, and we clashed. You know what I mean? They came representing and banging, and we was at, you're in our neighborhood. So we started off kind of fighting and things like that. That was the only black family in my school, straight up. So I didn't grow up with brothers and sisters. My interaction with them was in juvenile hall. You know, we're Salinas, Hala Brown. My brothers in Seaside at the time was still a military base. So there's a lot of African brothers and sisters. So my interactions with them were mostly in juvenile hall. And they had problems with the brothers from Salinas. So we back up the brothers from Salinas. So I'll be honest, and I've said it before, for many years, I was very racist, you know? And then you go into the system and you're actually segregated by race. They're setting your ass up. And even if you don't bang, you could just be a Mexican from Northern California. They're going to say, are you a Northerner? Are you a Paisa? You're a Southerner? And that's your options. Or an other, solo, right? And then, like, we were literally, like, they were setting up fights. We were fighting, like, I fought almost every Saturday for almost a year and a half, straight up. They were setting up, like, I was on Pájaro, and at the time, the sergeant, he didn't like the folks from down south because they had jumped them. So we were real short, but we were kind of winning because they were Scanuses. They would open our doors, you know what I mean? And then you go to state prison, and it's very much racialized to the extreme, to the point where I'm from up north, so I'm on this side of the yard with my brown brothers, my black and brown brothers, and on the other side of the yard, it'd be like the Southerners, the whites, and the Paisas. So it's literally racially segregated. And when I got to prison and started sharing this side, no, I'm lying. Back it up in YA, I started getting real close to brothers because we was riding together. You know what I mean? We was riding together, especially like the brothers from Northern California were backing us up sometimes. So I got real close. Then when I got to prison, the politics in prison, and also learning my own identity and my own roots and who we are. And I learned that actually my racist stance was contrary to who I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean? So I had to relearn things. And then coming home, being in the movement now, understanding that the way these systems and honestly, law enforcement and all their allies and this whole notion of public safety got us fucked up. It got them getting half of all of our budgets. That means other areas ain't got nothing, right? But again, I was hella racial, and I'm sorry for that, but that is not my stance no more. I'll go to war for you, sister, I believe that us men, we're here to protect the village. That's always been our role. So we're here to protect the women, the children, and the elders of all the colors. You know what I mean?
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, can I answer that really quickly? Because I had a complete different experience. I grew up in a really urban, multicultural city. So early on, it was everyone, Filipino, Punjabi folks, you name it, really, really multicultural. And so when I did end up locked up, I was indoctrinated with a lot of racist rhetoric, right? And so it was like a really internal battle within me where especially gang politics in prison is like, hey, like, no, those are your enemies. And it's like, why are they my enemy, But the big thing was like, I'm Native American, right? So white folks, we've always been, keeping it real, suspicious of white folks. And so when I got out, I think a lot of like my decolonizing, like super decolonizing, to like people like Malcolm X, right? Things I read while I was locked up. And when I came home, and what people told me was like, you got to educate yourself. That's the only way you're going to get off parole. That's the only way you're going to do good. And I go to college in a really rural community, complete opposite of where I grew up. And the people who most helped me, it wasn't Black or brown people. There was no Black or brown professors. The people who helped me were white men, white professors who were like, you're amazing and you're so smart. And they were the first people to ever tell me that. And I'm like, I'm smart. And they're like, yeah, you're deserving. So here I was growing up, right, thinking that like white people were my ops, right? And the only people supporting me were white men, right? So completely different, but yeah, like it was definitely a battle, like being told that I couldn't talk to other people because of their ethnicity, right? The color of their skin.
I can't wait sometime to talk to you also about the white care that I received too when I got out of incarceration. That's real. That's really real. We have a question inside. I want to turn it over to my dad for a question. He also served his youth there, and we've only got a few more minutes, so probably one person will answer it, but go ahead. And if you want to say your name.
My name is Gonzalez, and I was wondering, I was raised in the Bay Area in the 60s, hippies and all this, free love and all that stuff. But when I went to Youth Authority, I came out, I was a gangbanger. And I wondered what kind of effect did it have on your lives? And how did it form your thinking being around gang members and being segregated according to Mexicans, blacks, white, South, North, and all that? And I was wondering how it affected each of you.
I don't know if we have enough time for the answer to that question, but who's one person? Okay, you want to take two? Because there's somebody
there's somebody online, and it's Valerie Salazar, and what we're doing right now is enabling the unmute. So I think next, Valerie, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead and talk a little bit to make sure we can hear you in the room.
Can you hear me okay?
If not, we can also have her put the question in the chat.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see
can you hear me?
microphone is moving, but I don't
Nothing's
hear you
coming
in the
out.
room. Let's see, let's try this one more time. Give me 1 second. We're pushing up against time, but we'll go ahead and take Valerie's question if it can come through.
I'll try one more time talking. Can you hear me?
Who would like to take the question on that my dad put?
I mean, as I shared, viejo, like, unfortunately, before I went to YA, I was already banging, you know what I mean? So I went up there striving again to try to be the hardest, you know? But how did it impact me? Again, like the amount of violence back and forth all the way around, including staff assaults, like I've gotten the shit kicked out of me everywhere I've been to by these folks. But when I came home out of YA, I just didn't give a like. Honestly, I was a threat. You know, I was a threat to my community. I came out wild. I wanted to hurt my oppositions. Like we've been at war for years. Every chance we get, I'm trying to hit you or cut you or vice versa. And then you come home, and then there's no longer no COs. There's no you're free range. And in my community, like many of our impoverished Black and brown communities, it was cracking at those times in the 90s. That's when the gangbang blew up. And I shared earlier, I didn't even last 3 months, and I caught some triple attempts to quote unquote gang members, and kind of got into it with the police. That's how much I wasn't even thinking about consequences or not valuing my freedom, or not even, you know, they said we don't fully develop till 25. I believe it's true because I wasn't thinking about consequences, you know. But that's my response. Unfortunately, it did impact me, and it made me cold, heartless, and things like that.
I don't know if we have Valerie's question. I'm mindful of the time. The class ends at 6:45. I'm going to encourage people, if you're interested in stuff about race in prison, George Jackson has some great essays talking about the guards and about like how things are racially divided in prisons. And it's often good to go to the source. It's loaded, but it's also helpful if you really kind of want to like dive back into that. I want to lift up a primary source that way. Do we have a question from Valerie, or if? Yeah, Soledad, brother, and yeah.
Yeah, of course, man. You know, as you guys get ready to go, just thinking, even going back to the question around race in those spaces, right? It's there's the aspect of race, of violence, right? And how how we get desensitized throughout this whole process as we're kids, from juvenile hall all the way to the moment in that video you saw people being told to strip down, right? As a young man and going through that does something to you, right? Like, not only that's sexual abuse, straight up. There's no way around it. And it takes a lot for a man to say, like, I've been sexually abused. What they did to that young man by pulling down his boxers and making him do that, that's sexual abuse. Whether we like it or not, that is what happened, and people did it not normally, right? But you go through that on a daily basis, and you're being desensitized little by little, right? Up to the point where race and what you say and how you say it and how you maneuver and interact and create assumptions around folks and group of people, it becomes so normalized, right? And again, all a step of the way, I was in situations where staff would say, hey, so-and-so said this. Now you got to go do something about it. Because if you don't do something about it and they threw it on the tier, it may be like you may be seen as some sort of sucker. And if you're a sucker, you're going to get preyed upon. So a lot of these things, while it's fomented within our own sense of security, right? Safety and security within these institutions, it was also exacerbated by these racial ideals, right? In racial ideals, racist ideas that took place within these institutions by the staff, administration, and so forth. But even in the midst of all that, and when I was in the state prison system, I got to experience the hunger strikes. And even in those very moments where it was all bleak and it was crazy and there was really no one else there to support, I saw the humanity in each and every one of us. We were willing to break bread with whoever was next to us. We were taking care, hey, checking on old boy because he's by himself and you never know. So at a moment where it was so bleak, I saw, regardless of race, regardless of demographics, geography, and all that, I saw people come together. So even in those moments in such a toxic environment, humanity still exists. So for me, I carry that hope that that it's possible to do anything out here as well. Because I sure as hell saw a neo-Nazi break bread with the black brother. I saw a Mexican with another side from up north and then one from the down south eat together during such situations. So anything is possible, and I think it's just when we go back to our original humanity, that at that moment, and we recognize that, hey man, you know, my uncle says as soon as that door closes in ceremony, all you see is spirit, and that's it, right? All you see is corazón and spirit. So it's even in the midst of all this chaos and craziness that people live through, these institutions that we're living, not only currently right now in the United States with polarized rhetoric, but even around the world with death and all this shit taking place, that there's still hope to acknowledge each and every one of us as humanity. I just say much palabra.
Tina, could you let sister, everybody in the Zoom, we acknowledge them? I'm reading a comment.
Oh, yeah. So listen, Valerie, why don't you thank them for joining us? You want me to? Okay, thank you so much, everybody on Zoom, for your witnessing this event and experiencing it with us, and for your flexibility. And we see, Valerie, that you did uplift. She said she wanted to uplift the panelists. And yeah, sharing their stories, bringing them out in the dark informs the masses, even though they're hard to talk about and hard to hear. Thank you. I was in juvenile halls from 91 to 96 in Ventura, and YA was a field trip to scare us straight. Appreciate this being talked about. And Valerie, Israel asked that I uplift the folks on there, and they can read the comments as well. So thank you all so much. We can feel that support. And we will also, we made a slideshow of some of the photos that are here, y'all. So we will be emailing that via the Eventbrite somehow to the people that registered, because it has some captions and it has some of these photos of the ceremony and things like that that were brought inside to also uplift the possibility of healing in institutional spaces. So thank everyone so much. And I believe, I don't know if we have anything else anyone would like to say. Otherwise, we appreciate all your time. And we have some reports back there. Please take them of Beyond Repair about this history. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is right.